Hello, this is the Bible in Fewer Words. We are Carol and Steve Wells. This is episode 253, the Gospel of Mark, chapters 9 through 13. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Carol.
Do we want to tell our listeners something?
Yes, we do. We have a confession to make.
Oh, I love confessions.
Yeah, so when we started the Gospel of Mark, we were going to go through it, passage by passage, verse by verse, and we weren't going to consider the fact that many of these stories were told already in the Gospel of Matthew.
Mm-hmm. We've had this discussion.
Yeah, we had the discussion.
My vote was do not repeat stuff.
Yeah, and I said, well, no, it was told first in the Gospel of Mark. We'll just go through it like we hadn't heard it before. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is that we have heard it before. Mm-hmm. So you were right about that. Mark was the first gospel. It's also the smallest gospel. And it's also a gospel that's ignored by most people.
Oh.
Because the Gospel of Matthew and Luke are longer. They have more details and more sort of interesting things. They talk about Jesus' birth and infancy. Mm-hmm. The Gospel of Mark is often considered to be sort of a summary of the main synoptic Gospels of Matthew and Luke.
Okay.
So it tends to be ignored a little bit.
So we should ignore it too. Is that what you're telling me?
No, and we don't want to ignore it, but because the Gospel of Matthew included many of the stories from the Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of Mark was Matthew's source. They've already been told in Matthew.
Yeah.
And so if we do that, then it's going to take a long time to get through the Gospel of Mark, and we'd like to do it a little bit quicker. Mm-hmm. And so I think what we're going to have to do, especially now that we're just into the teachings of Jesus,
yep,
we should just say what hasn't been said before in the Gospel of Matthew. And so that's what we're going to do.
I love that idea.
Okay. Well, it'll go a lot faster. We should be able to cover 5 chapters
today
instead of the 2 that we've been doing previously, right?
Uh-huh. Are we going to have to go back and cut out a bunch of stuff at the beginning of Mark?
We probably should. But we probably won't.
We'll do that when we finish the Bible.
Yeah, maybe someday.
Okay. Well, are we ready?
Yeah. For this episode, I have the things that we're leaving out.
Okay.
And I also have links to the text in Matthew where it was said, and also in the episodes where we talked about it before.
Those notes that you have are going to show in more detail the differences between Mark and Matthew.
When the differences are very minor, then we're not going to have them here.
Okay.
In the notes, it'll mention what we're leaving out.
Okay. So, chapter 9. The disciples asked Jesus, "Why do the scribes say that Elijah must come first?" Jesus answered, "Elijah must come first and restore everything. He's already come, and they did to him what was prophesied."
So this is a little different. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus made a big deal out of John the Baptist.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, he explicitly said that John the Baptist was Elijah, who was supposed to return, according to the Hebrew Scriptures.
Yeah.
Here, he just kind of hints at it. He doesn't say that John the Baptist was Elijah. He just says that he's already come. I'm not going to say what his name is. And they did to him what was prophesied. Well, what did they do to him? Arrested him, killed him. I guess that supposedly was prophesied. Anyway, there's a little difference here, the way that John the Baptist is treated.
Okay.
John said to Jesus, this is John, the son of Zebedee. You know, we had John and James.
Oh, yeah,
one of those brothers. We saw someone casting out devils in your name. We told him to stop, since he doesn't follow us.
So people are copying Jesus?
Yeah, and previously in the Gospel of Mark, we had a lot of crowds following Jesus.
Yes.
He was casting out devils, and the devils knew who he was.
Yes.
So people may have decided, hey, he's casting out devils, and we could do the same thing. We could cast out devils in his name.
And does it say if they're successful?
It sounds like maybe they were, but it got the disciples upset.
All excited.
They said, hey, Jesus, they're casting out devils in your name. They're not your followers. They're not in our group.
They didn't get your permission.
That's right. They're doing it without your permission.
They're not sanctioned by you.
And so Jesus said, don't tell them to stop. Whoever does a miracle in my name won't say anything bad about me.
That's his main interest here?
It seems to be. Whoever isn't against us is for us. And whoever gives you a cup of water in my name will be rewarded. So that's something new that didn't occur in Matthew.
Mm-hmm. Everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if it loses its flavor, what will it be seasoned with?
That was one that was in the Gospel of Matthew, but it was a little bit more memorable the way it was phrased. It said, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its savor, with what shall it be salted? It is good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under the foot of men."
Poor salt.
Well,
he's lost his personality.
I think it's
and
what
he's
he's saying is that you're the salt of the earth. You, my followers, they're the salt. You're going to go out and you're going to salt the earth, with my teachings. And,
yes.
And that's going to make everything
great.
Taste good. Yes. I don't know.
Not one of his better
anyway,
parables.
You hear about that a lot. But not everyone will be salted with fire. There's something that is different in the way that Mark puts it.
Chapter 10. The Pharisees asked Jesus, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" Jesus replied, "What does Moses say?"
The Pharisees said, "Write a bill of divorcement and send her away."
And Jesus said, "He did that because your hearts are so hard. But from the beginning of creation, God made male and female."
That's why a man leaves his parents and gets married, and the two become one flesh. No one should separate what God has joined together.
Verse 10. Back at the house, the disciples asked Jesus about it. And Jesus said to them, "Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if a woman divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery."
In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talked about divorce, and he used much the same language as we have here, except that he made an exception. You can't divorce unless the wife has committed fornication.
Oh.
Then it's okay, you can divorce her.
Oh.
So you had that exception that he provided. Here, there's no exception. Always before, like when you talk about adultery,
Yep.
the sin is against the man because he owns the woman.
Of course.
But here, you can commit adultery against the woman, so that's kind of
Yes.
interesting.
Yes.
Anyway, according to Mark, divorce is not allowed. But for sure, Jesus is not allowing any exceptions. No one can get divorced, according to this passage in Mark, no matter what.
Okay.
Matthew apparently didn't like that so much. So he added, unless the wife commits adultery or fornication, then you can. But that's not the way it is in Mark.
Verse 35. James and John came to Jesus and said, so these are the Zebedee brothers?
Zebedee.
Zebedee. Hibbity, Hebedy, Zebedee. We'd like to sit on your right and your left hand when you are in glory. And Jesus said, that's not my department. Jesus said, I don't get to choose who will sit on my right or my left.
The other disciples weren't happy about it when they heard about James and John's request.
And Jesus said to them, among the Gentiles, one person rules over others. But it won't be like that with you. Whoever wants to be great among you must be the servant of all. The Son of Man came to serve, not to be served by others, and to give his life as a ransom for many.
Yeah, this happened in Matthew. Pretty much all of it happened in Matthew, just as it's stated here, except for one thing.
Yes, their mama went and asked for them.
That's right. The mother of James and John asked Jesus. She snuck up and asked him, hey, Jesus, I'd like you to add a little favor for my kids.
Yeah.
Here they ask directly. So that's kind of significant difference, I think.
Verse 46. Jesus and his disciples were followed by a large crowd as they entered Jericho, while blind Bartimaeus sat on the side of the road begging. He cried out, saying, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me.
Jesus said, what would you like me to do? He said, help me see. Jesus
said, go on your way. Your faith has healed you. And immediately he could see and followed Jesus.
Yeah, a similar story. Sounds like the same one because it was happening at the same time.
Is this the spitting one?
No.
Oh.
No,
Okay.
but it was a story about blind men, but it was actually two blind men who were healed. They didn't have a name. It sounds like the same story, but instead of being two men, it's one man, and he had a name.
All right. Chapter 11. When Jesus and his disciples neared Jerusalem, he sent two of them ahead with these instructions. When you enter the village, you'll find a colt tied, upon whom no one has ever sat. Bring him to me. If anyone says, "Hey, what are you doing?" say, "The Lord needs him."
So they found the colt, draped their clothes on it, and Jesus sat on it. The people spread clothes and branches in front of Jesus and said, "Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest." So we had this story. Remember that?
Yes.
What do you notice that's different?
Jesus only has to sit on one animal.
Yeah.
This will probably be easier for him.
Yeah.
The next day, when they were coming from Bethany, Jesus was hungry. They came upon a fig tree, but it had nothing but leaves, because it wasn't the season for figs.
Jesus said to the fig tree, "No one will eat fruit from you forever." And his disciples heard it.
The next morning, as Jesus and his disciples passed by, they saw that the cursed fig tree had died.
Peter said to Jesus, "The fig tree that you cursed is dead."
Jesus replied, "If you believe in your heart and have no doubt, you can say to a mountain, 'Move,' and it will be cast into the sea. Whatever you believe will happen, will happen. You'll get whatever you want if you pray for it and believe that you'll get it."
So that all is the same story as we had in Matthew, except for one thing. The fig tree died immediately in Matthew, whereas in Mark it took a while.
Oh, it
They
did. It took
noticed
the next
morning.
day. We're
Yeah.
having delayed miracles
Yeah,
again.
like remember we had the delayed miracle of the blind man?
Yes.
I think I see some trees walking there. So he had to rub his eyes again to make it happen. Yeah.
Okay, chapter 12. One of the scribes asked Jesus, "What is the first commandment?"
Jesus said, "Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. This is the first commandment. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. There are no greater commandments than these."
The scribe agreed, and Jesus said, "You're not far from the kingdom of heaven."
Yeah, this is also something that was similar in Matthew, except for in Matthew he said that all of the laws of Moses were based upon these two commandments. They could be derived from these two commandments. He doesn't say that here. He just says these are the greatest commandments.
Oh.
Matthew probably got it from Mark. Another difference here, the scribe agreeing with Jesus. The scribe said to him, "Well, Master, thou hast said the truth. For there is one God, and there is none other but he. And to love him with all the heart, and with all understanding, with all the soul, and all the strength, and to love the neighbor as himself, is more than all the whole burnt offerings and sacrifices." And when Jesus heard that, he answered and said, "Thou art not far from the kingdom of God." And no man after that dared to ask him any questions. So I probably should have had more than, and he agreed with Jesus, and he said, "Well, you're pretty much there, like what you're saying. Because you believe that, you're close to the kingdom of God."
Yeah.
So the idea of loving God and loving your neighbor, that's pretty much the essence of what Jesus is teaching or what Jesus is requiring of people.
Yeah.
Which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
In Matthew chapter 24, 51 verses, the horrible things that are going to happen, and they're going to happen soon. There's going to be wars and rumors of wars and disasters, and stars are going to fall, all that stuff.
Horrible of horrible.
And it's all going to happen soon within the lifetime of the people that are listening to it. That is all repeated here in chapter 13.
And you left it out.
I left it out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are ending on kind of a nice note with Jesus saying, "Hey, you're not far from the kingdom
that's
of heaven."
right.
That's what you have to do to get
love
to
God
heaven.
and love your neighbor.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty close to all that is required of you.
Yeah.
I think Jesus is saying.
Okay, well, thanks, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of work. I appreciate it.
Sure.
And listeners, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.